Hello and welcome to the St. Charles City County Library's virtual program, St. Louis Takes to the Air, Aviation History. My name is Shauna and I work at the Augusta branch of the library. Aviation has a long history in St. Louis. In 1910, President Theodore Roosevelt came to an airport in St. Louis because he wanted to be the first president to fly in an airplane. We started manufacturing newfangled flying machines in 1911. A 1920 hangar now is home to horses. St. Louis has been involved with balloon flights, a dirigible harbor, air taxis, military aircraft, escadrilles, flying saucers, parachuters, and commercial aircraft. We have aviation museums, guided missile sites, and the room where Charles Lindbergh was given the money for the Spirit of St. Louis. Doug Schneider will show how aviation has helped shape St. Louis and how St. Louis has taken to the air and shaped aviation. Our presenter, Doug Schneider, graduated from Ivy League Brown University with a bachelor's in history. He also graduated from the University of London with a master's in linguistics. Doug's an actor, a St. Louis walking tour guide, and he's a Route 66 enthusiast, just to name a few of his studied interests. In addition, Doug's an honor graduate of the United States Army Aviation School, which has been renamed as the United States Army Aviation Center of Excellence. So let's get started. Don't forget to use that chat feature to answer some questions and put some questions in as we go during tonight's presentation. Welcome, Doug, and thank you for being here tonight.
Okay, let me set up the share here. I'm going to share the picture. I'm going to share the sound. Okay, share sound. I'm not getting a click on it. Let me try again. Share sound. Okay, I'm not getting the sound here. Let me just go ahead. You forget now I got it. Okay, so there's sound in this picture. We're coming up here. I'm going to tell PowerPoint that I want to start the slideshow from the beginning. And you should see a black and white photograph. Shauna, can you? Okay. All right. So this is transportation. This is the year 1910. We have got a steamboat over there, lower right. We have the railroad, which is the bridge going across the Mississippi River, and we have an airplane. That's in 1910. St. Louis takes to the air. This is an aviation history. Let me just go back to this nice little illustration here of various means of getting in the air. An aviation history taught by Doug Schneider. As Shauna told you that I am a graduate. I'm actually an honor graduate in the United States Army Aviation School. And whenever I mention this, I always think about being the honor graduate. I got a prize. I'm in the Army, and my prize is a kitchen trivet with a picture of a helicopter. That's a UH-1 helicopter. And I got really, really puzzled. Why would the Army give me a trivet? Because I ate in mess halls. I didn't cook. And then I finally realized what they wanted me to do with this. They wanted me to send this home to my mother. And I didn't want to do such a thing because that meant my mother, every time she was in the kitchen, she would look at this picture of a helicopter and worry about me and the Vietnam War. So in any event, I was a graduate. Well, air mail. Okay. Deliver that letter. The first piece of mail to travel by air in the United States. This is the United States. It left St. Louis and it arrived in Henderson, New York. All right. Well, when did this happen? Those two places are far apart. And it was sent by a balloon in 1859. The first piece of airmail was sent by balloon. from St. Louis to Henderson, New York. Well, balloons are at the mercy of the wind. They didn't know it was going to land in Henderson, New York, but they put in the Post Dispatch that there will be a balloon mail from St. Louis if you want to send a letter to the seaboard. That's all they knew, is that this balloon would wind up somewhere on the East Coast. And you can go to the post office and have those sent to the East Coast via balloon. Yep, to the seaboard. And it was 1,150 miles. Of course, they didn't know they were going to land in Henderson, New York, which is upstate New York, but that was the first piece of airmail. Okay. So balloons were important, and certainly in the 19th century. Here we are in 1907 in St. Louis, 100,000 people came to the international balloon race in St. Louis. And that's the United States entry in the international balloon race. This is 1909. We have a centennial balloon race. Wait a minute. Centennial? It's the centennial of St. Louis. In 1809, we were incorporated as a city. And this 1909 celebration is a big deal. And actually, that is important in aviation history. But anyway, this balloon race and inflated with natural gas. Over here, you can see the structure that holds the natural gas for these balloons. 1919, we have the Army-Navy balloon race held in Priesters Park, which is no longer there in South St. Louis. But out in Eureka, every year, the annual balloon glow in Eureka and the annual balloon glow and race in Forest Park, which is a pretty big event. And here is the woman who founded this balloon glow, Nikki Kaplan. And she was an expert balloonist, and she actually flew a balloon through the arch, under the arch. Okay. Now, what happened in 1904 in St. Louis? Big event? There we go. Man's greatest achievement, the World's Fair. And aviation was part of the World's Fair. There was a competition, very strict rules, and you get a grand prize for the best flight of an airship or a flying machine, whatever. And the prize was $100,000 in 1904. Think about that. That's $3 million in 2024. But to get the prize, you had to go at a certain speed over a certain path, and you had to do that 3 times, and it wound up nobody got the prize. Wilbur and Orville were in St. Louis in 1904 before the fair opened, and they talked to the committee, and they changed some of the rules for winning the grand prize. And they didn't put down the $250 entrance fee for the competition. They just went back to Dayton. Now, if you know your aviation history, Wilbur and Orville flew at Kitty Hawk in 1903. But they were very, very cautious after 1903 about announcing and demonstrating their aircraft. So this is not a surprise that they would not compete in this competition. But this guy, Alberto Santos Dumont, he did put it down the $250. He was from Brazil, and he brought his airship packed in a box all the way from France. This guy has been in Europe demonstrating the dirigible. And here is his dirigible flying in Paris. And if you are from Brazil, you will always say that Santos Dumont flew before the Wright brothers. In any event, he was going to be in the competition, but he goes to where his dirigible, his gas bag was, and found out it had been sabotaged. There'd been sabotage. It was not usable. A local St. Louis person who had a sort of dirigible that was also sabotaged. So Santos Dumont did not get to fly. But people were watching whatever was going on in the air, and there was one fellow who got excited. He had been at the World's Fair. He went home to San Diego and built a dirigible and brought it back at the end of October 1904. And the name of the dirigible was the California Arrow. And this was not sabotaged. Here it is, getting ready to take off. And it is the first dirigible to fly in public in the United States. In the United States. So not only did it fly, but it did all sorts of funny things like circles and figure eights and landed back where it's supposed to land. This was astonishing. This was astonishing. Before this dirigible flew at the St. Louis World's Fair, the wind determined flight. The California Arrow at the World's Fair showed that aircraft could control where they went. This was mind-boggling, and of course, a great inspiration for aviation the rest of the century. Again, you're not at the mercy of the wind any longer, and St. Louis saw controlled flight. Not just St. Louis, there are 20 million people who came to the fair, so there's got to be lots of people who saw this and went back home to their various states and said, mankind can control flight, and a very exciting event there. Well, St. Louis did get around to building airplanes. The Wright brothers really were very, very cautious. They didn't fly in public until around 1907. And so other people are being inspired. And we have this guy Benoist here in St. Louis who's inspired, and he builds aircraft. And it's 1912, and they would build 106 aircraft. So they're quite busy, and you could get a nice little stock certificate from the Benoist Aircraft Company. And how did he get interested in planes? He went to the World's Fair. Yes. And here is his plane. And this means we're manufacturing aircraft, and St. Louis is kind of leading in aviation because of Benoist. So Benoist is going to have one of his aircraft is going to do the first scheduled flight. And here we are. You can see the Benoist name on this aircraft, and there'll be two people, a pilot and a passenger, who are going to go on this scheduled flight. And the scheduled flight, the first one in this country, was to go from St. Petersburg to Tampa, which in my mind were sort of next door to each other. But back in this time of transportation, it took a long time to get from St. Petersburg to Tampa. So the plane was made in St. Louis, and it began flying on January the 1st, 1914. And look at this map. You see the red line, which is the aircraft, but look at the railroad. For you to take the railroad, you had to go all the way around, and it was 11 hours and 11 and a half hours to go by train. But by airplane, only 23 minutes. First scheduled flight. So here we have the first scheduled flight, and you notice that the airplane can only carry one passenger. Only carry one passenger. And the cost to fly on the first scheduled flight, $5. $5. Okay. Now, seaplanes were a big deal because you didn't have to have an airport. But nowadays, seaplanes are frowned upon because they spread invasive species such as the zebra mussels, which are a big problem here in the Midwest. And so seaplanes are frowned upon these days. Well, St. Louis has had lots and lots of airports. Here's a list of them. So we're not going to talk about all of them, but I live in Valley Park, and Valley Park today has 6,000 people. But back at the beginning of the 20th century, we had three airports, uh, possibly because it's nice flat land there. But there were three airports near Valley Park. Festus, a little further south, the next county south of us, um, their airport was in use until a couple of years ago when it was closed because it's going to become a plant that makes fiber cement home siding. But all these little airports were around. But I'm going to mention the airports that are in yellow, or they'll get mentioned as we go along. This guy, he's got a horse. He's in Forest Park, but you see an airplane above him, and the building behind him, that's where the horse lives. The horse does not live in a stable. This horse lives in an airplane hangar, a former airplane hangar, because we had an airport in Forest Park, and this horse sleeps in the hangar there. And you can see this hangar when you drive by on 6440. Now, Kinloch Field is where Teddy Roosevelt came and was a big deal. Here's a little air show in 1910. And today, we don't know exactly where this airport was. It's very fuzzy. But in any event, it was it was thriving, and they invited Teddy Roosevelt to come and see the airplanes and to take a flight. Well, Teddy said, "Oh, see the airplanes? Yes. Take a flight? No. I will visit the field, but under no circumstances will I make a flight." But there he is. He got um, not quite bamboozled into it, but there are all these bands playing military music. The crowds were all enthusiastic, and the president made a trip in this aircraft. And here he has finished his trip, and he gets a little badge to wear because he made a trip in an airplane. He is not the current president at this time. He is a former president in 1910. Albert Berry, okay, this guy, the first guy to jump out of an airplane. And that happened in St. Louis, Jefferson Barracks, 1912. First parachute jump. So here we are. We've got the pilot. We've got Albert Berry. Albert Berry standing there. There's the pilot. And there's the parachute. It's that little container right there. This guy is going to jump off this airplane, and there's a parachute inside that container. Okay. And he sort of dangled below the airplane, attached the parachute to his harness, and he jumped. He jumped. Ooh. And the airplane, this is the first time this ever happened, the airplane bounces up in the air, but steadies itself, and Barry goes hurtling towards the ground. He just wasn't ready for what was happening. Would he do it again? He said, never again. He did somersaults. He was like a crazy arrow going down, and then just breaking away from the airplane was kind of violent. But that was the first parachute jump, and at Jefferson Barracks there is a marker on the ground where that happened, and there's the old spelling of airplane. Now, the Robertson Aircraft Corporation, this is after World War I, they fly passengers, and importantly, they flew U.S. airmail. They gave flying lessons and did exhibition flights and resold surplus military aircraft from World War I. Okay, and here's their little logo, and Omaha is furthest city away that they flew to at that time. And here is the airmail envelope going to Omaha, and this is the first flight from St. Louis to Omaha, and it looks like that flight stopped in St. Joseph and went on because airplanes did not fly that far back in those days. So the Robertson Aircraft Corporation, owner is William, the owner is Frank, their sister is Betty. Betty plays a role here. She is a trained pilot. She chartered the airmail routes for the Robertson Aircraft Corporation, and she chartered the route that Charles Lindbergh flew, because he was an airmail pilot. Yes. So here is a Robertson Aircraft Corporation on a postcard. Chicago to St. Louis. All right. Now, adjacent to Lambert Field, this little town gets renamed Robertson in honor of William Robertson, who was the head or one of the heads of the Aircraft Corporation. They have a nice little railroad station in Robertson, Missouri, and Robertson is now a ghost town. Now a ghost town because we built a new runway and we wiped out this town. And these were people who were living there and pretty happy living there, but they got kicked out for the new runway. But the name Robertson lives on in that the Robertson Fire Protection District covers many towns around the airport. And so you'll see Robertson just involved with fire protection, not with aircraft. And Charles Lindbergh, yes, he was here. There he is. Notice his plane, U.S. Mail, Robertson Aircraft Corporation. Yes, there we go. And he was the chief pilot for the Chicago airmail route, 1926. And here's a paycheck, Robertson Aircraft Corporation, paycheck $174.40. That's for C.A. Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh. I do not know if this was a monthly check, a weekly check, or whatever. We can just guess, but in any event, that was the paycheck there. And he lived here at this intersection. The building is not there any longer. It was an apartment building, the intersection of West Bruno Avenue, as you can see from this photo, and North Denny Street. North Denny Street got renamed. And I think you might be able to guess it was renamed to Lindbergh Avenue. Yes, yes. Now, Charles Lindbergh becomes enthusiastic. He decides he's going to try and win the Orteig Prize. The Orteig Prize is to fly an aircraft across the Atlantic Ocean, and you'll get $25,000. That's the prize. And he decides he wants to do this in spite of the fact that 16 people have died trying to win this prize. But Charles wants to do it. So he goes to a dining room at the Noonday Club. This is a club of movers and shakers in St. Louis, and it's on the 11th floor of the security building. The room is still there, and he went there and they awarded him the money to build the Spirit of St. Louis, which was built in San Diego, which is odd to me because San Diego is the furthest you can get away from the airport in Long Island where the plane's going to take off. But in any event, that's where it was built. But he got additional money from the Racket Club, which is on North King's Highway. So we got money support for this plane. Now notice what's unusual about this plane is the pilot does not have a window. The pilot has a periscope, sits behind the fuel tanks. So I think it was considered dangerous because a window could shatter and injure a pilot if there was some kind of crash or whatever. In any event, Spirit of St. Louis had a periscope. He flew from Long Island to Paris, 33 hours and 30 minutes. He returns to the United States of America with the airplane on the USS Memphis. He returns to America, and he is the most famous person on the planet. So there's a big ticker tape parade in New York, but his home is in St. Louis. So he is welcomed back to St. Louis with the ticker tape parade. And here you can see this is by the Central Library on Locust Street, the ticker tape parade for Charles Lindbergh. So the Spirit of St. Louis, the original Spirit of St. Louis is in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. It's a pretty, there it is hanging from the ceiling. Pretty snazzy museum, look at that. And the architect who designed this is a St. Louis architect. Anybody know his name? Well, you're all muted. And in the event, here he is, Gio Obata designed that Smithsonian building. Well, a replica of the Spirit of St. Louis was used in the Jimmy Stewart movie, and that's the one we have here at the Missouri History Museum. And that is hanging there at the Missouri History Museum. It's a replica. Now, Marie Meyer, she was an air stunt performer. And you can see her here in front of the Edison Brothers warehouse, sitting on top of that biplane. There she is, she's sitting on top. And people are watching her because she's doing these stunts, doing these stunts. She started flying at age 17. This is the early era of aviation, and women are playing a role. They're playing a role. She bought her own plane at age 20, and she formed an air circus. So she's going around performing and amazing people. Here she is hanging and doing various things, hanging from a biplane. All right. Now, she closed her air circus down. It's successful. She was she was agile. She was entertaining. She was a big deal, but she closed down her air circus. Why? Because of Charles Lindbergh. In Marie's words, his flight to Paris made airplanes no longer oddities. It used to be odd to see a plane. Now people don't consider it odd because Lindbergh has flown across the Atlantic. So she and her husband retired and they ran gas stations and candy stores out in central Missouri, but still reminded people that she did have a flying circus. And here's a Texaco ad about the link between Marie Meyer and Texaco. Okay. Eleanor Smith Sullivan. Um, she was from Long Island. She took flying lessons at 16. Both these women here, teenagers flying. And she was named the best female pilot in the country, ahead of Amelia Earhart, ahead of Amelia Earhart. So here we have this wonderful smiling woman, Eleanor Smith. And this is quotes from Eleanor that people seem to think aviators were from outer space, but after Lindbergh, aviators could do no wrong. They could do no wrong. They've been elevated from weirdos to experts. And she's just saying the impact Lindbergh had was immense, even like it more than the first walk on the moon. And then all of a sudden, people on Wall Street are looking at aviation as a place to invest because of Lindbergh. So it's all things have changed. Things have changed. And then everybody wanted to fly because of Lindbergh, and there weren't enough planes at the moment. They had to build more planes. Well, we're going to look at airports. The downtown airport had a number of names before it became the downtown airport. And here is their description: premier option for safe, convenient, and private air service in the St. Louis region. That's what that airport says. 5 miles from the Gateway Arch. There they are over there. And this has been an airport for quite a while. In the 1930s, Oliver Parks was here. Now, Oliver Parks is an aviation educator. Then in 1950s, downtown airport that goes into decline, and then it's rebirthed as the bi-state airport, and now it is an option for aircraft to fly in and out of St. Louis. And there's some of the original buildings still left, and they are going to be replaced, according to Representative Budzinski. The Federal Aviation is going to give money and design a new terminal. Over there near the downtown airport, unfortunately, we have lost the Greater St. Louis Air and Space Museum, which was a wonderful museum. They had aircraft you could climb in and you could pretend to be a jet pilot. But some COVID or whatever has closed that museum. That's a sad thing. Over on that side of the river, on the Illinois side, Scott Air Force Base, It was called first the Army Air Corps Aero Squadron Flying Field, and then it was renamed for Frank Scott, the first enlisted person killed in an aviation crash in 1912. So this is not wartime. This is just aviation time, military aviation time. And they had the second largest dirigible hangar in the United States over there at Scott Air Force Base. There's a postcard for it. And here's the interior. Notice it also held balloons besides dirigibles. Here is a dirigible inside that giant hangar. And the largest dirigible hangar was at Lakehurst Field, New Jersey. And what happened there in 1937 in Lakehurst, sadly, I think we all know, this is where the Hindenburg blew up in flames and basically ended the era of dirigibles. So Scott Air Force Base, Belleville, Illinois, there's their logo. Up to this point, it was just a flying field, basically under the Army, but the Air Force is established in 1947, so it's now Scott Air Force Base. And it has an air park. And what is parked at the air park? Various planes. And you can go and just walk around and look at these planes there. And here's an example. You can just walk up to that, and I assume you can touch it, and they're just sitting out there. Now, this is an Air Force base, and they're advertising a big air show with the Thunderbirds. Well, the Thunderbirds don't get the publicity that the Navy air demonstration group does. And the Navy group, of course, is called the Blue Angels. The Air Force equivalent is the Thunderbirds. And you can go watch them over there in Illinois. And here's some people enjoying the show. Also, they have a very active band called the Band of Mid-America, Air Force people. And here they are performing at the Arch, coming from Scott Air Force Base. Mid-America Airport, you'll see here there are two airports. This is Scott, and over here is Mid-America, and there you can see a little taxiway connecting the two. And Mid-America Airport today looks nice and snazzy, but opened in 1997, and it was considered a pork barrel project. And by 2015, nobody was flying out of this airport. It was empty. This is a typical scene at this airport, empty. But Allegiant Airlines came and they offered direct flights. St. Louis doesn't get a lot of direct flights, so that became a popular place to fly out of. And my stepson, who went there recently, says it's a wonderful airport. So we have Mid-America now doing well. And Boeing Mascoutah is right near Scott Air Force Base, and they built the autonomous jet, the Stingray, which has built for the Navy, no pilot, just the aircraft, There it is, and it's made in right out near Scott Air Force Base. Now, here's a bomb. We're talking Illinois. The first aerial bombing in the United States, the first time a bomb was dropped on American soil, happened near St. Louis on the Illinois side of the river. Metro East. Who dropped the bomb? Bootleggers. The Shelton gang and the Burger gang were at war, bootlegging war. This was during Prohibition. So the Shelton gang bombed the headquarters of the Burger gang. So the bomb was just dynamite wrapped around a container of nitroglycerin, and the couple bombs were dropped, but the only fatality was the head of the Burger gang's favorite dog. So this bombing was bad for morale. It affected the morale of the Burger gang. And this is the type of plane that was used, the old crop duster, to drop the first bomb in the um, history of the country. Sheldon gang took over bootlegging and gambling, and they thrived. Albert Bond Lambert, we're back on the Missouri side here. He he was in the Olympics, won a medal in golf. He was an aviator. He was also president of Lambert Pharmaceutical, which is the company that makes Listerine. And he got his pilot's license signed by Orville Wright. Orville Wright came um, and gave out licenses, tested people. He tested aircraft pilots, and he tested balloon pilots because balloons were still flying, still flying. Lambert Field, that's Adam Lambert, named after, became famous because Lindbergh was flying out of Lambert Field and had innovative air traffic control. Air traffic control is a new idea that Lambert is basically promoting. It's also known because the main hub of TWA, and it has a Terminal 1 nicely designed, but back in 1920, this was just a very practical place for, this was Lambert Field, basic Lambert Field. And then Lambert himself paid for this airfield. And then he paid for it to develop, and then he purchased the land. So it was like his personal airport. And here's 1933. Looked again at main building in 1933. And then here's 1956, and this is Terminal 1, the iconic Terminal 1. And that was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, who designed what building in Manhattan? The World Trade Center. Same guy did the World Trade Center and did the Terminal 1 at Lambert. So 2006, they're expanding the airport, $1 billion project. They wiped out residential and commercial properties. We saw what happened to Robertson, Missouri, and then they built, these are now all the runways at Lambert. So 2006 is when the new one opened. That's the red one over here. Now, 2024, this year, they're looking at the fact we've got a Terminal 1 and a Terminal 2, and they're going to combine them into a single terminal, and they're just working on an assessment to see what's going to happen. This is just a drawing of what it could possibly look like. Well, Archie League, you haven't heard about him, but he is big in the history of aircraft because he was the first air traffic controller. First air traffic controller. And what you come to mind when you hear that is guys sitting in towers with the headphones on and looking at dials and stuff. But Archie League was 1933, and he worked with a wheelbarrow, 2 flags, 1 checkered, 1 red, a pen, some paper, and a chair. This is it. This is the first air traffic controller. Okay, and there's Archie with his umbrella, and there's his wheelbarrow with all his equipment in it, and he is the first air traffic controller. He goes on to better things. Here he is a little bit later. Here he is at night. He worked at night, and finally he becomes the director of air traffic control for the FAA. And he didn't have to work outdoors with the wheelbarrow. He got an office. Now, sad moment in St. Louis aviation history, 1943, the glider crashed. We were at war. We were at war, and warplanes are being made in St. Louis. So it's a big deal. The aviation industry is in St. Louis, and they want to show off the glider, a glider. So they invite these important people to come and try out the glider flight. And they look enthusiastic, they're smiling, except for this guy over here on the right. He's not too happy to be on this glider. And maybe he knows some history of the glider, but in this case, everybody looks happy. And who's on the glider besides the pilot and the mechanic? the mayor of St. Louis, there's the city controller, director of public utilities, president of the Chamber of Commerce, Robertson's 17-year-old son. You remember William Robertson is the president of the Robertson Aircraft Corporation. Yes, so there are these prominent people, and here is the glider, and it's being pulled by a regular plane. The regular plane is going to take off and take the glider up high and release it. But the right wing on the glider will detach, and the glider will fall to the ground, and 10 of the 12 people on board will die. And again, these are all these people that have roles to play in the city of St. Louis, and 10 of these will be dead. So they're at the Scottish Rite Cathedral. They held the memorial service for these guys. This is the largest stage in the city of St. Louis, by the way, the Scottish Rite. And to memorialize this, there's a plaque in the atrium of City Hall. You can see it there on the stairway, memorializing the people who died in the glider flight. So it was a very sad moment. Another airport we have is the Spirit of St. Louis Airport. This guy is an enthusiastic pilot, amateur pilot, and he moves from Minnesota to St. Louis, and what's available for him? Flying out of Lambert. Well, Lambert's got all these commercial flights, and Paul's got to wait 45 minutes just to take off, and that's not good for an aviation enthusiast. He wants to take off as quickly as possible, get up in the air because he enjoys flying. There he is with his Cessna. So what does Paul do? He creates his own airport, and he's going to be better than Lambert. He's going to have a business park associated with it. It's land out in Gumbo along 6440. You got it financed, but unfortunately, on the other side of 6440, which wasn't there, of course, at that time, was another airport, the Lobmaster Sky Ranch Airport. So what he did is he combined operations with Lobmaster, and that was a big deal. The mayor came out. There were all these celebratory balloons, and they had a helicopter come by and burst all the balloons. And in 1980, the county took over the Spirit of St. Louis Airport, and it is can handle various types of aircraft. And oh, sorry, there. Let me go back. Last view. This was the big flood. This is the flood that St. Louis. I lived in New England at the time, and people were sending bottles of water to St. Louis because of the floods and the hard hit out there in the Chesterfield and the flatlands out there. This airport also has a golf course as well as a business park. And they had an air show and Spirit of St. Louis air show back in June this year. And the Blue Angels came to St. Louis to perform at the Spirit of St. Louis air show. So you see U.S. Navy. Clearly, the U.S. Navy wants you to know that these are Navy planes. But we also had Skip Stewart. You can see he does fancy stuff. And the shooters, people who are parachuting and doing stunts with parachutes. We've got a regional airport. It's east of Alton, Illinois. It's the backup airport. That's just called a reliever airport. And whenever things get busy over at Lambert or wherever, then planes will land at St. Louis Regional. Any size plane, that's a C-5A in the U.S. Air Force, that can land over at that reliever airport. So the airport is good. Now, when I say O'Hare Airport, you're going to think Chicago, but it could have been us. It could have been St. Louis, because O'Hare grew up in St. Louis, in South St. Louis. And there he is being held by his father, that smile on his face. And that's Easy Eddie, who's not a pilot. He's an attorney, and he will go up to Chicago, the father, and he will go up to Chicago and, and becomes a confidant of Al Capone. Yes. And anyway, Butch enlists in the Navy, World War II, became a pilot. FDR awarded him a Medal of Honor in 1942. As you may remember, we entered the war in December 41. So in the beginning of the war, there wasn't much going on, but so FDR had to find somebody to give a Medal of Honor to, and Butch O'Hare got it in 1942. There he is in his plane, was shot down. His body was never recovered, and he earned the Navy Cross um, after his death, gave his life for his country. And here in St. Louis, we know him. We know he's a hero, and they talk about building an airport here, a new airport, and we're going to call it O'Hare Airport. But Chicago got ahead of us, and they took the name, so O'Hare is associated with Chicago. Creve Coeur Airport. This is I like this story. It's a guy in a Piper Club. He's flying around, and there are two people on the ground waving at him. And he decides he'll land because it's a flat farm field. He lands. It's a nice piece of ground. Oh, nice piece of ground. Let's make an airport. Yes, here's a homemade runway light that's made with a mason jar at Creve Coeur Airport. Here's what it looks like in 2008. Looks kind of nice here, but just founded by somebody who landed in a field. Um, and it's grown. It's got lots of hangars and lots of over 300 air types of aircraft, and um, it's been much improved, much improved. And here is Haas. He's the airport dog over there on the right. Now, we do have a historic aircraft restoration museum, and that's at Creve Coeur Airport. And this is not well known. It's not open all the time, but they've got vintage aircraft from 1917 to 1954, and they are good enough to fly. They do not fly, but they maintain them so they could fly. So here's a picture there. Here's a Curtiss Robin, which is a workhorse and manufactured in St. Louis. And these people came all the way from South Dakota. Their father did a flight in a Robin. Their father was learning to be a pilot. He did a solo flight in a Curtiss Robin. And it's that Curtiss Robin, which is at the Restoration Museum. And these people came from Aberdeen to see the flight where their father, the airplane where his father did his first solo flight. Ruth Stewart, socialite. She becomes the first St. Louis woman to receive a pilot's license. And she is in the Museum of Women's Pilots, which is in Oklahoma City. And there's a nice smiling picture of Ruth. And she wanted to do something special. And she, with another female pilot, decided they would fly to Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires, yes. And that meant flying over lots of water and mountains. So here we have the headline. Unfortunately, they were lost, both pilots, and that's 1932. Jeannie Levitt, she is from St. Louis, and she has a degree in aerospace engineering at Texas and a master's degree in aeronautics from Stanford. And she, St. Louis woman, becomes the first jet fighter pilot, first female fighter pilot. Parks Air College, that was over there with the downtown airport on the Illinois side of the river. And they moved it He had his own little area. Then he moved it to the downtown airport. It was the largest air college in the country. And they decided to donate this college to St. Louis University, and that becomes the Oliver Parks Department of Aviation Science. And they eventually move all the administration to this side of the river, McDonnell Douglas Hall, in 1998. And here there's a little picture from St. Louis University about this uh, aviation education. And it's the first federally approved school of aeronautics. And here are two students, or no, I guess one student and one teacher, and getting undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees in aviation science. Well, Washington University is also going to offer you the chance to become an aerospace engineer. And this is it's a Master's of Science degree in aerospace engineering over at Wash U. Design, build, and fly. Well, St. Louis Community College, they prepare people for careers, and they prepare people to work at Boeing. And they've had over 1,200 graduates of the community college have gone on to employment with Boeing. Yes. Now, we have manufactured airplanes ever since the days of Benoist, and that was 1912. And here's a model. Then the St. Louis Aircraft Company, because World War I came along, and they continued to make military planes also for World War II. And the parent organization of the aircraft company was the St. Louis Car Company. And immediately your mind will say, car company, they make automobiles. No, St. Louis Car Company makes trolley cars. In any event, they turned over to military planes because of the war needs. And there's the 4D Jenny, that type of plane. Curtis Robinson comes along. So we had a Curtis Robin plane at the Restoration Museum. This is 1920, built for durability. Yes. Then Curtis Wright is created. That's a merger, two companies, and that's they do the Helldiver. That's what you see here. Then McDonnell comes along, 1939, and they took over Curtis Wright. And here is the FH Phantom, which is a McDonnell plane. First jet to land on an aircraft carrier. And there's a Navy Phantom FH-4. This FH-4 set the speed record of 1,390 miles per hour. Here's a pilot, this Phantom. And then they set the speed record in the circle. They did a 20-mile wide circle to set the speed record. Oh, then McDonnell Douglas, which is a merger of two companies. Here's a product of McDonnell Douglas. Here are a whole bunch of products of McDonnell Douglas. And then McDonnell Douglas, we now talk about Boeing. Boeing originally started in Seattle, and they acquired McDonnell Douglas in 1998. And Boeing has a prologue room. It's free. It's not open all the time, but it's worth visiting. I'll show you some photos of it. It's just all these aircraft and information about aircraft and spacecraft. And this is where dreams were turned into reality, and little focus on Boeing products, of course, but aviation in general at the prologue room. And here is the space capsule, which I believe is also a Boeing product. And then, so those are the lists of the major manufacturers. Metro Air Support, this is run by police, combined police in St. Louis and in St. Charles, and they train with all sorts of other organizations, SWAT, canine units, and fire agencies. Here's a police, one of their little, let's see, a little gasoline-powered helicopter. And that helicopter will respond because there are things happening on rooftops. And if something's going on, the police are are going to enter a building, they would need to know what's going on the rooftops. And they also just check that things are going okay on bridges and at the arch around St. Louis. And of course, exciting kids to get into the aviation world. Ozark Airlines was started here, and there's a plane flying by the arch. 1950 to 1984, TWA took it over. And if you go to the 1980s, um, most of the boardings were TWA, but about a third of them were Ozark. Here you have both planes side by side. Go-getters at Ozark. Go-getters. Now we're going to look at the logo for Ozark Airlines, and there are birds on the logo. So the question is, what bird is on the logo? Well, you're muted, so you can't shout out. Well, you can shout out the answer, but nobody will hear you. 3 swallows. What do swallows have to do with aviation and traveling by airplanes? Well, swallows always arrive on time at San Juan Capistrano out in California. They always come back on the same day. So they are on time. And you want your airplane that you're flying in to arrive on time. So that's why they have swallows on the logo for Ozark Airlines. Well, transcontinental air transport, we're going back a little further. This is now air flight is developing, but rail is how people got around the country. But we now have a way to get all the way across the country using both methods of transportation. You would fly from New York to Columbus. You would take a train from Columbus to Waynoka, Oklahoma. You would then take a see, take a plane, yes, to Clover, New Mexico, and then you take a train to San Francisco. It only took 48 hours, but this was a big deal to get from one side of the country to the other. Yes, yes. Trans World Airlines, here is their a building. So that's the Terminal 1, sorry, Terminal 1, and the Trans World aircraft in front of it. And founded through one of these mergers you saw before. Howard Hughes took it over in 1939. He was a bit erratic and not the best person to run an airline, but he ran TWA until it was purchased by Carl Icahn, who had basically no interest in aircraft. At least Howard Hughes could fly an aircraft. But Carl Icahn was only interested in money, and he took over TWA, and TWA wound up being purchased or merged into American Airlines in 2001. So there's the constellation with the famous 3 fins on the tail, 3 tail fins. So Trans World Airlines, first airline to carry freight, first passenger airline to carry freight, or maybe the first airline at all to carry freight. They carry a lot of weight. And then they're the first automatic pilot. They used celestial navigation. They were the first airline to serve you fresh brewed coffee, first airline to show you an in-flight movie, first airline to separate out smokers and non-smokers. And here is their wonderful building at JFK. This is the TWA terminal at JFK, designed by Eero Saarinen. And I was an employee of the Port Authority of New York, and I was an airport engineer at JFK, but I was not allowed inside the TWA terminal because most of my work was outdoors and I wore Bermuda shorts. Therefore, I could not enter this building because these were the days, this is the early 60s, when people dressed up to go on air flights. And you couldn't have this guy in Bermuda shorts inside your terminal when men are wearing suits and women wearing dresses. So I was banned from this terminal Other airlines allowed me, but I couldn't go into the TWA terminal. Out at our airport, we are lucky to have this as have art at our airport. And here we have a mural about flight. And here we have a little love sign. This is over at Terminal 2. And here is an interesting mural at a baggage circle. This is also Terminal 2. This is a woman who is inspired by maps and does murals that look like maps. And here are two people looking forward to flying in the terminal, the main terminal. And here is a mural you can walk on at the airport. So St. Louis takes to the air. Here's a nice little picture of all these things flying in the air created by artificial intelligence. But anyway, they are various methods of flying. This is an aviation history. I'm Doug Schneider, and St. Charles Library is your host. In January, they are going to have me talk about sunny Portugal. In February, they're going to have me talk about St. Louis houses with a wow factor. What makes a wow factor? Well, what makes me say wow about certain houses and buildings, or not like houses in St. Louis. In March, talk about ethnic dining in St. Louis. I've identified 81 different international cuisines in this city, and including a restaurant that serves food from Guam. So that talk is coming up next year. April, the topic will be earthquakes in St. Louis and in Missouri. As you know, the most destructive earthquake in the history of North America happened just a couple hundred miles south of St. Louis in 1812, known as the year where the Mississippi River ran backwards. In May, talk about things that were introduced to the world at the World's Fair, either created for the first time or just shown to people and people just made them popular, like peanut butter, which was invented in St. Louis, shown at the 1904 World's Fair, and all of a sudden available all around the country. June, murals in St. Louis. We have the longest graffiti art mural in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. It's so long, I haven't been the entire length of it. I've only driven about 3 miles of it. Okay, so that's in St. Louis. You'll find out about it, and you'll hear about it if you're on my mailing list, or if you check, of course, the St. Charles County website, St. Charles City County Library website. So I will stop sharing. And I stop sharing. Shana and Michelle will look at the chat questions. So you guys are muted. There's Michelle.
Okay.
I was going to say something. Hi, my name's Joe. I'm Olivia's name is on her, but I'm really Joe. I just wanted to mention, and I came on late, a few minutes late. I apologize. First of all, Doug, this was outstanding, very informative. The 1943 glider thing. My dad had once told me about that. He was an air traffic controller at Lambert, and he once mentioned that. And I was a kid and didn't think anything of it. But now when you see the picture of the people, you really take it closer to heart. But you kind of skimmed over one part with the expansion of the airport and from 1988 to like the mid 2006, I guess it was. I just want to know, what was your personal belief about that? I know it impacted me and my family greatly. And my dad, like I said, was an air traffic controller in Lambert, and he had his own opinions. He's in heaven now, but the opinions and what you thought about that personally.
Well, I of course knew people whose family homes were wiped out. And I also know that I have driven by that runway a bunch of times, and only once have I ever seen an airplane on that runway.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
That airplane was the president's airplane, Air Force One. which, okay, all right, yes, Air Force One shouldn't be near all the other aircraft
Yeah.
in Lambert, but that's the only time I've seen it used.
No.
So,
Well,
uh,
that's I would just
but
wanted to because I thought the same thing because that's where my parents' house was when I grew up and I had a home and
yeah,
we were in Carrollton Oaks subdivision of Bridgeton and it's a sore topic to me and I can't even show my kids where I grew up
okay,
and
but just this week,
you saw planes?
just no, just this week, they're building it back. They're going to reinstate Robertson, Missouri. They're
Well,
talking.
I'm thinking more Bridgeton, but yes, Robertson, just like you're talking about the fire district itself. But yeah, that's very
No, not the
interesting.
fire.
I don't know
Not,
how many
I'm talking about the town.
the town Robertson, and I'm trying to remember that growing
Yeah,
up. I was born in 1962, but
yeah, yeah. In any event, they're looking at turning it turning it back into
that'd be great. That'd be fantastic.
semi-industrial, but it's not right now. They don't like, well, it's just sitting empty. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
In any
Very
event,
interesting.
your father was an air traffic controller.
Yeah, he was there for
Did they give him
38
a wheel?
years.
Did he get a wheelbarrow?
No, he didn't. He
I
was
didn't. Oh
he was
no.
1997. He passed away from esophageal cancer, but he was there for 30 plus years, and he fought against the expansion. First of all, remember the first plan was called the F4 plan, and then they went to another plan. I forget what that was. They
Yeah,
named it, but it was destructive. And the thing that it was dual runways and separation due to bad weather, and it still didn't work. And he fought against it, but there were some other factors in place politically that he
yes,
could
yeah.
not beat at that time.
Mhm.
And it was just very sad to see that. And also, we knew Conrad Bowers. People on this forum know the name Conrad Bowers. He was the mayor of Bridgeton at that time, and he fought it greatly also. But we lost. And the
Yeah.
Bridgeton was a great community. It's still there, obviously, but it's not anywhere near where it is. But
Right.
I didn't mean to take over your call. I apologize. This is outstanding, and I look forward to joining some of your other presentations down the road. Thank you very much, Doug.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right, Doug, we did have a question in the chat, and somebody wants to know, where was downtown airport?
Downtown airport is 5 miles from the arch. It just drive. Well, you have to go across the river, and it's just 5 miles southeast of the arch.
Okay,
So,
and then Sarah, if you're on, I see you've typed in W1W. I'm not sure if you want to pop on and.
I think that's what she meant
Ask
the
your
second
question.
plan when I was she was answering me when I said F4.
Oh, so you changed it.
W1W was the
Okay,
second plan.
got it.
Yeah,
All
she
right.
got my blood, but when she said that one, oh, what's she saying?
And then Art,
Okay.
Art,
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Anybody else want to pop on?
yes, Shauna, I see that Art has his hand raised. Art, did you have a comment or a question?
Yes, I do have a couple of comments. The one on the expansion, if you look at the time when it started, TWA was very active at this airport. In fact, there used to be like an elephant train just to get taxied out and take off from the airport. There was a need at that time, but unfortunately, as we know, the demise of TWA and then American more or less pulling out, it's become more of a regional airport and the runway's not being used. But all these things that get developed take many years, decades to happen. And now that runway looks like, well, why did we build it? Well, at the time that it was being built or beforehand, the planning of it was this airport was active and very busy. It was needed. Unfortunately, at the consequence of losing a very nice town in Bridgeton or part thereof. But the reason I raised my hand initially was to mention that American Airlines was actually a consolidation of the American Airways in 1930 that was a merger of Robertson Aircraft Corporation and Colonial Air Transport. So, there's, I mean, you keep on expanding in regards to the connection of St. Louis, but American Airlines, basically the roots of it were here in St. Louis. In addition to that, there used to be a couple of airlines that were hometown airlines. Trans-States Airline, a regional airline that flew for American Connection and Delta and others, is no longer. It went out right at the beginning stages of the pandemic. But there's another airline known as GoJet Airlines that flies as United Express here in St. Louis. It's a home-owned, family-owned regional airport at Lambert, and has its own 145 repair station. And nobody's really aware of it, but there's a lot still going on. Lots of aviation activities, both on the Mississippi east side, as well as Spirit, and at Lambert Field, or St. Louis Airport, International Airport. But still, there's a lot of aviation here in St. Louis, and a lot to be proud of. So that's just something I wanted to bring up in regards to the early roots, not only of TWA, but that of American Airlines as well. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Okay. Doug, thank you for bringing this wonderful presentation to us, and thank you also to our participants for joining us tonight. Keep an eye out for the follow-up email with the recording of the program and a survey. Thank you for completing that survey, as it will help us when we are planning future programs. Please consider joining us for Doug's next presentation. As he mentioned, sunny Portugal is scheduled for Thursday, January 16th. It starts at 7 p.m. And you can visit our website and you can find our calendar there, and that's where you sign up, just like you must have done for this program. So our website, stchlibrary.org. Explore more programs and events happening at the library, both in person or virtual, along with many other services that we have to offer. You'll find them there on our webpage. Thank you for joining us tonight.